The Creative Psychotherapist is the official podcast of the Creative Clinicians Corner, a practice-building resource for creative psychotherapists. TCP Podcast is the cast for creative, expressive, and experiential-focused psychotherapists curious to learn how to design, build, and scale a thriving private practice. Your host, Raina Lombardi, interviews successful therapists about the tools and strategies they have used to develop creative-focused practices. They also talk about the products, services, and side hustles they have developed using their knowledge and creativity to enhance their therapy practices, make a greater impact in their communities, and diversify their income streams. Welcome. Now here's your host, Raina Lombardi.
Hey there, creatives. This is your host, Brianna Lombardi. I am so happy that you continue to join us and listen week after week of these episodes of the Creative Psychotherapist podcast. We recently reached over 2,000 downloads, which is incredibly exciting since we just started this year, and we owe that all to you. So thank you so much for continuing to listen. I also wanted to share with you that I have an opportunity for 3 people who are in need of some clarity around where to start their creative psychotherapy practice. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a psychotherapy practice. It could be a business that relates to their therapy knowledge and enhancing the work that they do as therapists. But I have an opportunity for 3 individual clarity coaching calls or consultation calls with people. I've been offering a discounted rate through COVID-19, which is going to expire at the end of September 2020. If you want to take advantage and you need some individual supported guidance to really get clear and narrow down your area of focus, give me an email, creativeclinician@gmail.com, and let's set something up. All right, enjoy the show. Thanks for listening to the Creative Psychotherapist podcast. I'm your host, Raina Lombardi, and I am very excited to welcome my next guest to the show. Her name is Brianna Mcwilliam, and she is an author, educator, and licensed and board-certified creative arts therapist with more than 14 years of clinical experience helping adults with insecure attachment styles go from self-doubting to self-sovereign and call in the soul-shaking, passionate partnerships they want without years of talk therapy and no results. She's also published 2 textbooks on the topics of attachment and complicated grief and working with LGBTQ populations. Currently, she maintains a small practice, but primarily offers courses online in self-help and personal development as a love and attachment coach. She's also the director of continuing education for Pratt Institute's Creative Arts Therapies Department. Welcome, Brianna. Thanks so much for making the time today.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
So I want to just kind of dive in and talk more about kind of the work that you're doing in the realm of online self-help and personal development courses, specifically because I think in our training, it's not something necessarily that's discussed or put out there as an option. And I think what you're doing is kind of setting the stage for new opportunities for people that want to expand beyond the realm of that one-to-one therapy relationship and make a greater impact. So can you tell us a little bit about how that works? What does that look like?
Well, so, it kind of, my journey of coming to this began with having a small practice and, struggling with referrals and how do I get clients in and making relationships and nothing coming of those relationships. And then it would sort of be like a feast or famine. All of a sudden I get a lot of clients and then I would feel sort of burned out, but I needed them because I needed to make my overhead. And then they would, for whatever reason, terminate or move away or something would happen. And then you're back to the famine phase, right? And or you're just perpetually worried that that's going to happen. So there's that level of instability that that you struggle with. And I simultaneously, while I was trying to build my practice, I'm a continuing ed provider for the state of New York for licensed creative arts therapists. So I was sort of playing around with the idea of what can I do with this certification that I have. And a fun fact about me, I also love paranormal romance. And I was working at the Amen Clinics, which is a brain research and diagnostic facility, when my hours got cut. And so I decided I could either take a demotion because the funding for the research department that I was working with got defunded, or I could just do something on my own. So that was when I decided that I was going to do private practice and try and figure out how to make teaching in that work. But it didn't happen very quickly. So all of that's going on. And I'm also writing paranormal romance novels in my spare time because that's where my joy really comes from. And I'm thinking, I don't need to be a therapist. I can just be a romance writer. So I ended up writing 5 unpublished romance novels and they all won awards. And for whatever reason, they like editors would request them and then they would just never get picked up. It was always something that would happen.
Gosh.
But I did get invited to do lectures at conferences and things like that, talking about credible character conflict, right? So therapists are really good at talking about conflict in relationship. So I went to do a lecture on credible character conflict and I got a standing ovation. And afterwards, a woman comes up to me and she says, "Do you have an online course?" And light bulb moment, goes on above my head. And I think, not yet, but give me your email and I'll let you know when I do. And so I actually collected the emails of everybody in that room. And then I went home and tried to figure out, how do you build an online course? What is involved with all that? Set it up. And then emailed all those individuals and said, "Hey, you can now, I've turned that lecture into a course. You can come buy it." And crickets. Not one person bought it. So I thought, okay, so I guess that's going to be tabled. So I set that aside, continued trying to build the practice, continued to feel frustrated with that. And then New York State passed a law requiring LCATs to have continuing education. So I thought to myself, and I had a lot of friends who kept asking me for my study materials for the art therapy board certifying exam. And I took it a while ago, but my materials had done the rounds with my colleagues when they were taking it. So I thought, well, if they like these materials, maybe other people will like them. So I thought maybe romance writing isn't the way to go. Maybe I'll just throw up my study materials and see what happens. So that became my online study guide for art therapy test prep. And to my knowledge, it's the only one that's online. And people did want it.
That's awesome.
So it was like, so this online thing could work. I just have to figure out how. So it started with continuing education because I had all these group protocols from 10 years working in outpatient clinics and working in inpatient settings. I had protocols for short-term treatments and directives and things like that. And I thought to myself, well, these are just courses. And put them together as courses. So continuing education was actually my bridge into the online space. And then after the law passed, a lot of other people caught on eventually. So my income plateaued and then it started to dip. And I thought, I don't want to go back to, I don't want to go back. Yeah, I don't want to go back to like struggling, to find clients and have that be my only revenue stream. So I did a little more research. I paid a huge amount of money to get business coaching in the online space, and made that money back by the end of the training. So it was
that's incredible.
Yeah, I was like, the program was $8,000, and I'd made 16 by the time I got out. So it was a big aha moment for me. It was like, whoa, I can take my skills as a therapist. I can take my skills as I'm an art creative arts therapist, so I have a degree in illustration design. And I can mash this all together to create something online that is educating people and sharing, you know, a message of self-compassion and how creativity can help us unfold into ourselves. And I chose attachment because of my own personal journey with that. And it felt like that was what I had the most aptitude and the most to say about. So I decided to hone in on the niche.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, it just kind of took off. It just, and then, so it's been almost 4 years. And in that time, my business has had exponential growth. And I ended up like leaving my academic teaching role. I'm still doing thesis research and advisement. And I did I helped the department set up their continuing education. But it's more peripheral role now.
Mm-hmm.
And primarily I'm basically online, and all of the clients that I I do still see some private clients. I see maybe 4.
Wow.
And they're with me since my early days when I was setting up and breaking down, doing sessions in a massage parlor. They've stuck with me, but
That's incredible.
yeah, but now, you know, doing our sessions online. Quarantine, yes, but we were doing them before that. I had transitioned into the online space prior to that, but so that's kind of where it's at. And a lot of what I do now is I've set up what are called Evergreen Funnels. So basically, it's a sequence of actions that you invite people to take either on your website or through a Facebook ad that put people into what's called a funnel, but it's just a series of actions that they can take online, which familiarize them with you, with what you offer, with your platform, with your voice, and give them exposure to your online spaces. And the idea is that over time, you can set enough of that up on automation that you don't have to touch it anymore. People just are moving through these interactions that you've created by pressing a button. So the things that I do now are what's called optimizing that experience. So doing the things that would make that experience more relevant to the people I want to serve. And also showing up and creating new content, basically. So a lot of my business comes from Facebook and from YouTube.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time that I spend now is reading and writing, and thinking about and listening and engaging and interacting with the people who have now come into my online spaces, so that my message and my voice and what it is that I have to offer becomes even more refined, so that I can, you know, express it better.
Florida Art Therapy Services is a proud sponsor of the TCP podcast. They offer art therapy for individuals and groups, as well as qualified supervision services and high-quality, experiential-driven continuing education for art therapists, mental health counselors, and clinical social workers. Visit www.floridaarttherapyservices.com for more information. And if you're interested in becoming a sponsor of the Creative Psychotherapist podcast, we have copper, silver, and gold options. So visit www.creativeclinicianscorner.com/podcast for more information.
I think you do an amazing job at really honing in and tapping in on, like, this is exactly what you're going to get if you watch
Yeah.
this video or join my course. But it is very refined. Can you speak a little bit about that process of kind of what it took to find that niche
Mhm.
and narrow it down?
Yeah. Well, it did not happen overnight.
Mhm.
When I first started, in the realms of business, there's an expression called the power of one. And it means one idea, one audience, one product, one path, one social media outlet, and you hone in on the one thing, and you focus on the one thing, see it all the way through. And then once that is, you know, you send it off in the Moses basket. And once it's up and running, then you focus on the next one thing. And this is something that I actually find other therapists, coaches, and healers struggle with a lot, is they've got so many ideas. They see how so many different parts and pieces come together. They are enthralled by, the different types of things that they could do, all the people that they could help. And what happens, at least in a marketing space, is you come to be seen as a jack of all trades, but a master of none.
Right.
So when someone has a serious illness, do they go to a general practitioner, or do they go to someone who's an expert in that area? Right. So this is what they say, that the riches are in the niches, that you become the person who is the go-to person for that thing. Right. And I think a lot of people are afraid to narrow things down like that, because they're like, oh, but it's what I call like scarcity attitudes is what I call it, but it comes to mindset, right? Like, but if I leave it wide open, then I'm more likely to be able to pay my rent, because more people are going to see me and they're going to think that I can help them. But usually the opposite thing happens. People think, oh, well, they don't really know what they're doing. They're just sort of like a, one size fits all. And I want someone who knows my specific issue. Right. So that process for me became a culling down over time. Initially it was the continuing education. I had so many continuing education courses, because I had created like group protocol after group protocol, and I just threw them all online. So then I thought, so in transitioning into the online space, I actually at first thought, well, no one's going to want to hear about attachment and relationships. And that was the thing that was the most interesting to me. I mean, I just been writing 5 romance novels, right? So that's the thing that if I was like, all right, well, if I'm not going to give up being a therapist and I'm still going to find a way to put this freaking degree and license to good use, then it's going to be talking about something that I find interesting. So, and of course, that's because of my own rocky romantic relationshiip. So, I think that's also part of what makes something successful versus unsuccessful when people step into this space, is if it's an extension of their own life's journey, if it's an extension of what they feel is part of their mission and reason for being on this earth, then it's going to be a lot more successful, because it's not going to be something that overwhelms you. It's not going to be something that you have to, figure out in order to accomplish some goal because you think that's going to give you the A grade. It becomes an extension of who you are, and it becomes an extension of, like, to quote another cliche, living your message, but like taking that really to heart. And it also requires a mindset shift, because as therapists, we're trained in many ways, at least from a traditional psychoanalytic position, to be the mirror, to be, to step into a transferential, countertransferential relationship, to function as an arm of some aspect of the client's experience, so that they get to revise that experience on some level, right? So there's levels of confidentiality, obviously, around that. There are levels of, for the therapist, how much am I seen? How much am I not seen? How much of my own personal experience do I bring into this conversation? Is it going to serve the client? So on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
So there's so we have to have a really strong grasp of boundaries, and have a really strong grasp of how to navigate gray areas without falling into splits, right? And when you step into the online space, depending on how you choose to brand yourself. So a couple of people who are already in the online space, and therapists and even creative arts therapists, you see how they make this decision. And I think probably the most comfortable one for therapists is to brand it based on the service. So people will say, a couple of creative arts therapists will get together and they will brand the service. Like, this is a unique service, and this is why you'd want to come work with us. And that's fabulous. That's just one way of branding. Another way of branding is to create a personal brand, which was the direction that I went in. And so a personal brand is where you become the brand, and your voice is you're sort of the voice of the brand. Now, the trick with that is, if you are the voice of the brand, then how to differentiate your products, because if you ever want to do something else, and you still want to make money, then you have to be able to like put other people in those positions and have your product still sell, even though you're doing something else, right?
Right.
So in that sense, I really encourage people to develop a process or a method by which that they work, that they hone, that they cull, that becomes sort of the container for what it is that they're offering. So I used to teach this to therapists, coaches, and healers. But then my other aspect of my business got too big and I couldn't do it anymore in terms of time. But so for example, I usually recommend that therapists create a 6-week signature course, and that course becomes kind of like an appetizer, like when you go to the grocery store and they're like, here, try this. And if you like it, maybe you'll come back and buy more. So that's sort of like what the 6-week course is. It's like giving people a little taste of who you are, what you have to offer, what it's like to work with you. You charge them for it, and then they will or they won't. But either way, they feel like they can get a little piece of you without necessarily having to commit to an hour every week. And then may come back and decide that they want more. So for example, my first 6-week signature course was Healing Attachment Wounds with Mindfulness and Creative Art. Over time, I came to realize that was wildly way too broad for my audience. I mean, it sells, but it's way too broad. And what I needed to do was make it more applicable to someone who doesn't, what is attachment? Like not everybody even knows what attachment is.
Oh, absolutely.
So that was a process I was making money while I was going through this process because done is better than perfect, right? And that's the other thing that people, I think, get stuck on is it has to be perfect before I put it out there.
Totally.
And so I highly recommend trying to scrap that idea. It really, done is better than perfect, and be making money while you're perfecting your craft. So that was kind of how I did it. And while that was selling, I was also building an online group in Facebook, private Facebook group. And once you start getting around 200 members in a group, now they start chatting with each other, and now they start engaging, and now they start commenting. And when that happens, now you as a practitioner, but also as a business person, are thinking, oh, that's the marketing copy I'm going to use, right? Because they're just handing it to you. If you want to know how to sell somebody something, listen to what they say. So now I know very specifically, like in my marketing copy, what people are like, how to say what it is that they are looking for, because I'm listening. At this point, my Facebook group has 10,000 people. So
wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, it's a very active and engaged group as well. And that also had its own growing pains, like how to manage a group that size without it getting in public. But so I have a lot of data to work with, and at this point it's fun because I'm positioned still at Pratt to be able to do research. I'm going to be submitting an IRB proposal to take the online courses I've been selling and with some of the graduate students conduct research study to see if those can be used as treatment protocols, like enhance them a little bit and see if they can be used as treatment protocols and get a quantitatively statistically significant study. So, now I don't think it's going to be any issue because I threw up a draft of an assessment that I want to research and I got 250 respondents within a week. So that already is a statistically significant number. So I think that is also just thinking big, like that's another direction that one can go in is, if you can figure out how to work with your audience, make a little money while you're doing it. And then down the line, if you've got aspirations for research, or if you've got aspirations, for running, week-long intensives, or if you have aspirations for doing online group coaching, which is another thing that I do that's really fun. There's so many different directions that you can go in it. There's so many different ways that you can express yourself to the people that you want to serve. And there's so many different ways that you can make money.
Yeah, it sounds like you have really experimented in a variety of realms. And it's interesting to hear you talk about it. Obviously, you're coming from the therapy background, but you're putting it out there in more of an educational style, but now you're going to pull that educational style and put it back into the clinical intervention piece, which is a really like interesting way to weave that process.
Sure. Well, it's interesting because I've been developing a method, and you know, so the thing that strikes me is that in the realms of research, particularly for creative arts therapies, there's a lot of like what are called value add studies. So creative arts modalities are added to an existing method or added to an existing protocol of something that is known to work. And we're like, okay, well, let's add something creative and see if it helps. And of course it does, almost in every case. But what I would like to do is, my goal is to create a method that is founded in creative arts interventions as the modus operandi. So it's not adding any, it's incorporating trauma-informed evidence-based practices, and in particular practices that assist people with insecure attachment. But, every theory I'm reading, like right now I'm reading a book by Deb Dana on polyvagal theory. And, I'm reading these other books and they're all talking about, like they're offering directives that are arts-based to work with these things. And I'm like, yeah, duh. Like, so I just, the research piece for me is also like, if we can put it on the map, let's put it on the map. And if I have the resources to do it, let's do it.
No, it's wonderful. I mean, obviously you've created a wide following, and so you have the number of participants to really draw and get really strong conclusions and evidence to support it, which is incredible. And I think that's the other thing lacking in a lot of the creative arts research literature is the study size is usually quite small, or so to have that you created yourself is pretty incredible.
Well, and also utilizing the online space, right?
Yes.
And also I think the other thing is reaching out to people that you find interesting and being surprised at how often they'll just respond. So I was reading research on attachment stuff and like, what assessments am I going to use? And I read an article by Dr. Federico, and he lives in Paris, and he has developed an attachment assessment which utilizes artificial intelligence to read micro expressions, and it's multimodal. So it uses music, sound, imagery, and asks and verbal, prompts to ask questions to assess attachment style. And it basically fills in all the gaps with the limitations of the existing assessments we have, particularly around avoidant attachment, because the nature of avoidant attachment is to not have a lot of awareness around it, right? And to think that you're fine, but you're kind of not. And because there's an aspect of when you have an emotional response, you shut it down, right? And that's the dorsal nerve stuff going on. So, and the body betrays that through skin conductance, and it betrays that through micro expressions. So he's created an assessment to sort of compensate for that. And I just emailed him and I'm like, I love this. How can I work with you? And so he's going to help me with this research project.
That's incredible.
So it's fun and it's exciting and it just keeps getting bigger. So I guess all of this is to say, transition into the online space it's an interesting paradox, because on the one hand, it's narrowing it down to the power of one, like pick one thing, pick one idea, make one course, invite this audience, listen to what they have to say, just repeat it back to them. And, if you build it, they will come. And then once you do that, all these other things also open up for you.
So it's counterintuitive to think that, narrowing it down is going to create limitations for you. It actually expands the horizon.
That would be my take on it.
Very cool. So I know you had mentioned kind of the idea of having some mindset shifts, and I think definitely switching from the realm of I'm going to provide psychotherapy to somebody to I'm going to provide a course to somebody. There's a mindset shift there.
Mhm.
But I think you're also speaking to kind of the concept of growth mindset when it comes to how you're structuring your business operations and what
Yeah.
you're pursuing. Can you
Yeah.
speak a little more about that?
Sure. Well, so there's a couple different facets to this. I would say the first is money. We have to reframe the way we think about money and how we value money and what money represents for us. Supremely important. There's a book it's called Tapping into Wealth by Margaret
Hmm.
Lynch.
Okay.
And she uses emotional freedom technique, which is tapping,
Hmm.
to help you kind of process the underlying beliefs that we all carry around about money. And therapists especially, I think, are susceptible to this because what drew us to therapy in the first place is likely issues surrounding our own worth and value. I mean, let's be honest. If we care about helping people struggling with their own sense of self-worth and value, it's likely because we have struggled with our own sense of self-worth and value. And
Absolutely.
so money becomes this intense fulcrum, over which we're balancing. I need to ask what I'm worth because I have to pay my bills. And more than that, I want to thrive in this lifetime. And do I have to feel guilty for wanting to have the luxuries I want to have in my life?
Yes.
Versus, but if I raise my rate, then I'm taking the food off somebody else's table. Right.
Hmm.
So we have to kind of let go of that. And there's the easiest, there's so much I could say about that, but I'll stick to recommending Margaret Lynch's book. And also another great book is called You Are a Badass at Making Money by Jen Sincero.
Hmm.
And I'm also reading books like Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. And what I discovered actually is a lot of people who make a lot of money, there's actually this whole introduction of notions of spirit and energy. And
Yeah.
most of them think of money as energy, not as a physical thing that you give and trade. So one of the things that I did when I started making more money is I started shifting my mindset from thinking about money as like a piece of paper, basically, that I had to work hard to earn. And I had to start thinking about it like a lover. So, and oftentimes we treat money like a lover, money just wants to call you. Money wants to show up at your door. Money wants to buy you a drink and saunter over and just, sip cocktails with you. And what do? We say, no, money. No, money. It's not you, money. I don't deserve you, money. If I take you, then, that girl over there won't have you. And I can't tolerate the idea that she'll be suffering. I can suffer. I know what suffering is like. I can tolerate it. I'd rather suffer than have somebody else suffer for you. No, money. It's not you. It's me. And this is how we treat money. And so we have to, or we see someone who has the things that we want and we feel envious, or we moralize it. Oh, they must have done something awful to get it. Right.
Yes.
Or, and this also speaks to our notions about suffering. We feel that suffering gives things value. Similar, like, so for example, in my niche, people will think, well, if you're not suffering, then you don't love me. If you're not suffering enough, then it must mean you don't love me. Right. And if I haven't suffered enough, that must mean I don't love you.
Yeah.
And so same thing goes with money. If I haven't worked hard for my money, then I haven't earned it. I don't deserve money unless I've earned it through hard work. And so some people will say, well, yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of people who work hard make money. Yeah, because once they've worked hard enough, now they feel entitled to it. And it's not because they've worked hard. It's because now, because they feel entitled, they're going to let it in. Now they're energetically open and in a receptive mode. Prior to that, they're not. And so it's really more about the energy that you have. You don't have to work harder. You just have to work smarter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I
So
think that's
that's
really important concept because when you are setting out to go out on your own and you're still seeing clients, but there's all this behind the scenes administrative
That's a
working
good
in
point.
peace, that like you can't always be doing the client facing work and then still have time to invest in all the behind the scenes stuff that you're doing in order to push yourself to the next level.
Well, that's a
Um,
good point. And I want, that actually is another one of the mindset things that I would talk to or speak to, is the idea that I have to be able to do it all myself.
mhm,
So I'm the face of my business, but I have people working with and for me. So that was the other piece I had to learn, was delegation,
mhm.
and how to be a good leader, and how to know my limitations, and to know when I needed to hire help and I needed to take the financial hit to get the help, and have faith that once I hired them, that actually was going to open more things up for me. So, for example, when my Facebook group, the one that now has 10,000 members, when I first started doing it, I was doing everything myself. I also didn't want to approve. I didn't want to just have people be able to join it willy-nilly. Like, I wanted them to have to answer a few. This is actually good practice. You want to vet people a little bit. You want to ask them a few questions. And this is also how you start getting your marketing copy. You run an ad to have people join a private Facebook group. You spend $5 a day on it. And people will start asking to come in. So then you restrict entry by asking them to answer, like, even just one question first. And the question would be, what is your biggest struggle related to, the topic of your group, whatever it is. So for me, it's, what is your biggest struggle in love and relationships, right? And whatever they say. So when I first started running my group, I would just copy and paste their answers. And that became my list of pain points and struggles. And then you might ask, what is the one thing what do you think would help you the most? And then they tell you, right? Okay, so that's the foundation on which I'm going to start to frame my course content, right? Anyway, so I go through all that, but as the group was growing, that would amount to 200 people a week. I'm like approving and copying and pasting and blah, blah, blah. No. That's a waste of my time. That is not what they call zone of genius.
Yes, absolutely.
So then my first hire was a social media manager. And it helps when you make those hires. I highly recommend that you educate yourself first on what it is that they do and how it is that they do it, so that
Yes.
when you hire someone, you are the strategist. So you're telling them what you want them to do. And especially if you don't have a lot of money, you're probably going to be hiring someone who's a bit green. So you're hiring a workhorse when you first start. You're like, okay, this is the strategy. Here's the ABC way to do it. I just need you to run it, right?
Mhm.
And then over time, that person, if they're looking to grow, and it's likely they are, if they're taking a lower rate because they want the experience, you kind of work together and you build that relationship. And so now my social media manager knows my voice inside and out. So we reached a point in our relationship where now she can start to generate content and it just sounds like me.
That's
So
incredible.
yeah, but it takes time, right? But the point is, she took a huge load off my plate, right?
Mhm.
Which means, like, okay, now I can focus on other things, which is like the next level of scaling and growing. And so then my next hire after that was a Facebook ads manager. So
Mhm.
someone that was, so you really have to take paid advertising seriously, at least to get to the level that I'm at right now. And I'm making 20 to 30 grand a month. So you have to be willing to spend money to make money.
Mhm.
It's just, that's also another part of the mindset. And you have to know it's going to come back to you. That money, people, we make a little money and then we put it in the bank and we save it and we sit on it because we're like, okay, I made it. Now I don't want to lose it. Right. But when we have that mentality, almost always out of the blue, there will be some expense that pops up like out of nowhere, or the cat or the dog will get sick. And all of a sudden you got a huge vet expense out of nowhere,
Mhm.
or, no, like something comes up, right? Some unpaid medical visit you had shows up in your mailbox, oh, by the way, you owe like this in back taxes. What? So that little nest egg you've been sitting on, all of a sudden it's depleted. And it's because when we're worried about saving and holding on and sitting to and keeping something, it's the equal and opposite side of feeling a lack of something. And so the lack is what is going to start vibing. And so then you will bring into your experience occurrences that will bring you back to a state of lack. So it's important. Now, I'm not saying don't save anything at all, but it's about being mindful of how much you're going to save, how much you're going to invest, how much goes into your operating expenses, how much goes into growth, and recognizing that, like, how to be a money person. So a lot of people, especially creative arts therapists, like, I'm an artsy type, I'm a therapist, I'm not a numbers person, I don't know how to do that. You got to get over that. Like, that's all mindset stuff too. You can learn it. You can learn it. If you can check your email, you can learn how to do numbers, because it's just a matter of pushing a button. So, and there are books that help with that too. A book I can recommend is called Profit First.
Love it.
Profit First is a really great book.
I totally agree.
Have you read that book?
Yes, like 3 times.
Yeah.
And I love his philosophy, and just a lot of his stuff is just great. Mike Michalowicz.
Yes. And when he was talking about his money story, I was like, yes, that's mine too. I've never been a money person, told myself all those stories. And now I'm making more money than I ever thought I would make. But also recognizing that this is not nearly as much as I'm going to. And just,
love that.
Yeah. And just being in that vibrational state of abundance, and this is the thing, is that when you're in that state, you can be 1,000 times more generous, so I pump out 2 videos a week on my YouTube channel of free content, just answering people's questions, and so comparatively, I would say that the courses and the products that I offer are pretty inexpensive considering the quality of the work, and considering how much free stuff I give away. But I think because the platform has gotten to the size that it has gotten, I can charge lower rates and make more money. And part of what gets me there is being able to balance, okay, I can give this away for free, and this knowing but this is the piece that people need to pay me for, because this is the value that I have to bring, and my gifts are worthy of high compensation and value, and I don't serve anyone by not claiming that for myself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's unhelpful for us as a field, I think, to go along with this idea that therapy should be provided for free.
Yeah.
I feel like, yes, we want to help people that need it and that they're not in a place to be able to afford it. Yet at the same time, I think, like, the overarching message in the field is you're not going to make money in this field. You didn't get in this for the money. Those kinds of messages, I know I heard those in grad school, in my early jobs that I had. And that's simply not true. It's really the mindset that the entire field has taken. It's almost like a martyrdom syndrome.
Yeah.
And I think it does further damage to stigmatize the field, because now what we're teaching society is that, well, it's not really a value.
Well, no one says doctors shouldn't be paid.
Right. Or lawyers.
No one says doctors or lawyers shouldn't be paid, but I focus on doctors because we're talking about health, right? So what makes people entitled to the skill that you have to offer, but without compensation? But a doctor who arguably is the difference between life and death for you, you have to pay.
Right.
Doesn't make it. I mean, any luxury item, we accept that you have to pay more for a quote unquote a luxury item. And so some people might think of therapy as like a luxury, right? And yet, if more people went to therapy, I would argue, how fewer instances of medical visits and somaticized issues and would there be? Like, would the medical establishment be what it is if we paid therapists and mental health practitioners as much as we pay surgeons?
Right.
I mean, it makes absolutely no sense. It makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah.
And I think it's a symptom of the dismissal that we as a culture have for the emotional body. for the felt experience, for that which is the self. But as a result, and if we can be filled up and have an abundant attitude and mindset and energetic vibration, if you will, then that is actually what allows us to serve the collective in so much better. But we don't see that, and that in and of itself is an expression of a pathological mechanism in the collective.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. And I think that's part of my mission, and why I want to help people to branch out and go out on their own, is because once you do, you're forced to really do all of this work that you're talking about, the mindset shifts, the really evaluating how you're spending your time and prioritizing in a different way. And it allows for so much growth, so much more opportunity to create a life that you can thrive in versus survive in. And I feel like most people that are in the burn and churn of just the community centers where people are working, they're surviving, they're struggling, they're having a really hard time financially because of the loans, the amount of money that we spend to acquire our education and acquire these additional trainings and credentials. It's a huge investment in time, money, energy. And then on the other end, they're like, well, what did I do this for? I feel like I'm drowning all the time, but we don't have to drown.
That's why I'm here now. I just, but it's a gradual process. It's because there is a lack of money. Like we do live in the physical world of form, and there will come the first of the month, and you will need to submit, our paycheck, and all of that is true. But one of the things that I would say is, and that helped me, was a recognition that if I want that to expand, or if I want that to change, that it has to start with the way I'm holding my energy in my inner space. And then you have to allow for there to be a little bit of lag time. But once you keep holding on to that energetic place inside, you will start to see the external environment shift and move and open up with unexpected possibilities. And if you are attending to and opening up and looking for this, I'm going to say the signs, I like to call them winks from the universe, but like little opportunities will come in. So I'll give you two examples. When I first started doing this, so going back to that example, like I went to the conference, they said, do you have an online course? And I built one and no one bought it. So at that time, I was still just like in the beginnings of everything, setting up, breaking down in a massage parlor, giving, sessions to people, and really frustrated, like, God, I'm never going to get out from underneath this. If I don't make enough money in the next year, I have to move to Florida or something. And so I was frustrated, with my situation. And out of nowhere, an ad kind of popped up on my feed. And it was a referral from someone, like, I know someone, she's a social worker, but she likes to paint. So she has an office adjacent to her own where she's turning it into an art studio, but she wants someone to help, pay the rent for it. And so I went to look at it because I thought, I'm sick of this setting up and breaking down in a massage parlor. Like, I want an actual office. And I want an office where I can get messy. I don't, that I was this close to paying, whatever it is, like the $25 an hour for, in New York, we have these huge, like, buildings where it's just, it's just empty offices and people rent them by the hour and stuff. And I was like, I don't want that to be my experience. I don't want that to be my space. So I walked in, gorgeous, sunlit art studio, and 1 block from the train in downtown Manhattan, easy for my clients, easy for me, really lovely space. And she said to me, I said to her, oh my God, I love it. She's like, okay, great. So I just need $750 for first months and $750 for deposit. That was half my rent for my own apartment. And I was just like, okay. And then cried the whole way home because I was like, how the fuck am I going to pay for this office? I just said yes to something I cannot afford. And I'm sobbing, and then I have fears of confrontation. So I was like, I'm going to have to disappoint her and tell her that I can't do it. And like, already I'm anxiously anticipating the phone call where I have to tell her, no, I can't. And like, it's just like, ah! So I'm like crying, and I'm just delaying, and I'm just like, oh, but I want it. And I was like, no, gotta have faith. Something's going to happen. I kid you not. 3 days prior to me having to call her and say, no, I can't do it, because this was supposed to be the lease signing, a friend of mine actually went into my ex-husband's house, and he has an art, we have an amicable relationship, and he has a piece of my artwork that I made 10 years ago. I've never sold it, never gave it to anyone, because it's like one of my favorite things I've ever made. She walks in there and she says, oh my gosh, I love this. Can I have it? And he said, well, you have to ask Brianna. She's kept it for a long time. So she calls me up and she's like, how much do you want for that painting? And I was like, $750. And she's like, done. I was like,
amazing.
She bought that for $750. I was like, wow. So then I had a little bit of hope. So then there's like a little piece of me was like, oh my God, I'd have to scrape together another $750. So I did the one thing I said I would never in my life do. I asked my mother for money. And she did what I always knew she would. And she said no. And I thought, oh no. And then the day before the lease, but I mentioned that because I think in asking her, even though I thought I wasn't going to get it, even just by opening up and asking and saying the thing I never thought I would ever try to do, I think I opened up that energy. Like, I think that was I was asking her, but I was really asking the universe. I was sort of like surrendering an aspect of my ego. Like, at this point, I can't make this happen. So I need to open up and ask for help. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And the day before my lease was due, or I had to sign the lease, the art therapy course, the one that I told you that I was like, oh, maybe this will work. The first payment came out of the membership site, and it was exactly $750. So I had first months.
That's
I had
incredible.
The security deposit, all within 3 days of having to sign that lease. And you see how all the threads come together now, right?
Right.
This woman asking me at a conference if I have an online course. Nobody buying the online course. A friend asking me for my study materials. Oh, maybe study materials would be good online. And then all of it kind of comes to this confluence, maybe 5 months down the line, where now I'm able to afford the ideal office I always wanted, right? And I didn't know how I was going to get the next month's rent. But I was like, I got to take it. You can't just like see a wink like this and not take action on it. So I signed the lease, and it did. Clients came. They showed up. I ended up being in that office for 3 years until last year, when my online business just took off so much. I was like, I can't do it. I have to let go of something.
Mm-hmm.
But so that's one example. Now, another example is, since now being in the online space, when I first started, I was coaching therapists, coaches, and healers on how to do what I do. And then I was also coaching, doing the attachment, audience, love, and relationships coaching. And it got to a point where, so the coaching for therapists, coaches, and healers, in my experience, was a harder sell. And for all of the reasons that we've discussed here today. They're just, you and I may be here talking about it and feel ready, but not the majority of the audience is not quite ready. Right. And the investment is high. You do have to make an investment of time, energy, effort, and money. And when we struggle with a scarcity attitude around money or around our own value and our own worth, it's a lot harder to get people to take that leap to know that they're going to succeed. And if they don't know, and if they struggle to adopt that mentality, it is going to be hard for them to succeed. It's that Henry Ford quote, if you believe you can't, you can't. And if you believe you can,
yeah.
you can.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah. So I was sort of at a crux in my business where I could continue like investing in and in advertising and all of the expenses it costs to try to serve an audience, or I would let that go and just focus primarily on the love and attachment audience. And at that point, I was making maybe $5,000 a month on what I was doing. And so I I am a little witchy. When I want to make a decision, I pull out my pendulum. And my pendulum actually makes a lot of my business decisions for me, and it's never steered me wrong. So I'm a little witchy in that
Wow.
respect. So that my sort of spiritual practices and beliefs do make it into the way I manage my money. So I invested, I think it was $3,000 in an advertising campaign to try to recruit therapists, coaches, and healers to learn how to do what I do. And no one signed up during a launch cycle. So that was just 3,000 out the window. And I thought if this must be a sign, like this must be a sign from the universe. But I wasn't sure. I felt really strongly about wanting to help my own community. And
Mhm.
but then I had to dig into myself, and I'm like, is it that I really want to help this community? Or is it that I feel like I'm going to lose my community if I don't help them like come with me? Right? Is it actually an abandonment issue that I'm struggling with here? Am I worried about abandoning them? Am I worried that they are going to abandon me because they're going to see me as like this salesy online, coach? And especially amongst licensed therapists, there's a little bit of condescension towards coaching, and things like that. So
Mhm.
I had my own issues around that, like, and envy. Are they going to envy me because now I sold out? Like what are all of the those were my issues. And so I'm checking YouTube. And YouTube, as I mentioned before, is where most of my audience comes from. And that was an accident. Originally, I was making continuing education videos to vend to therapists, and I knew my computer was going to crash. So I was like, I need to put it online somewhere so I don't lose it. And I just started loading them up to YouTube because you can have a free YouTube account. And I knew nothing about YouTube at the time. I didn't know you could privatize anything. I didn't know you could make videos unlisted. I didn't even know that when you posted them, they were public. So I just was like loading videos up to YouTube because I knew my computer would crash, and it did. So it crashed. And then I thought, oh, thank God I loaded up all those videos to YouTube. And I go to to my account to download them so I can, reaccess them. And I had 1,000 followers. And I was like, what? That was over the course of like a month or two. I hadn't checked it. I was just loading them up. And over the
Wow.
course of that time, I had gained 1,000 followers on attachment. These were all attachment course videos I was posting. And so that was when I was like, oh. So I set up you can monetize things on YouTube. It's not easy to make money on YouTube because it's like if someone watches an ad on one of your videos, you get like 10 cents or something ridiculous like that. So it's not, so YouTube in and of itself is not a moneymaker, but it
Mhm.
is, you can make some if you get a massive number of subscribers and viewers, but it is a good platform to get attention, and it's a good platform
Mm.
for like sharing content, like and to refer people to. So I thought, well, maybe I'll start paying more attention to YouTube. So then I started building my YouTube channel, and so I forget where I was going with this.
I I'm not sure either, but it's like the YouTube, it was almost like just like it just happened
It just
that
happened. That's kind of what I'm getting at. But it was like, so the videos come in, I'm putting all of this together. Oh, this is what it was. And I set it up to be monetized. So, but I never checked it again. So 3 years later, I'm at this crux in my career where I'm like, do I keep trying to coach therapists, coaches, and healers while I'm also trying to coach these attachment and self-help and development audience? Or do I take the power of one seriously and choose one over the other? And so I lost $3,000 in trying to coach to this
Mhm.
audience. And I still didn't want to let it go. And I was also recognizing that I had all these abandonment issues, all these fears about envy, all of this relational stuff actually coming up around me and my attachment to my community. Who is my community?
Mm.
What is my identity? What is my identity as a therapist? Am I a
Yes.
therapist anymore?
Mhm.
If my license and my education and everything that I do and I know and I understand and I do have skills in this area, but is all of that, do I lose all of that if I decide my primary identity is not therapist anymore? Does that still serve me? How does it serve me? if I'm not enacting it in the way that I've been taught how I'm supposed to enact it, does that mean that I'm unethical? Does that mean that I'm not doing what I'm quote unquote supposed to be doing? So all of that became very present for me. And so I'm talking to my Facebook ads manager and I'm telling him about this. I'm like, I don't know. I feel like I'm at a crossroads. I need to make a decision of some kind. And he's like, oh, well, we're checking our YouTube analytics and all of that. And he's like, oh, look, it says that you have a payment waiting. And I was like, what? So I go and I log into AdSense or whatever. And I have $3,000 waiting for me.
From YouTube.
From YouTube, because I had never checked it and I had never submitted my payment info, like my payout information, because I got overwhelmed and just never went back to it. So I lost 3,000 in trying to serve the self-help, the therapist, coaches, and healers audience. And then when I checked the YouTube channel for the attachment audience, it was sitting right there. So I thought, okay, all right, big wink. You know, there's an expression, when God speaks in whispers, don't make him shout. So I was like, okay, I hear you. I got it. So these two stories, now I'm going back into my thought process. These two stories were just to illustrate that sometimes you have to take a leap of faith, and sometimes you have to be willing to take a hit to realize that hit may actually lead you somewhere that opens things up so much bigger. And that, going back even further, was about delegation, right? So I'm not a one-person show. I've got my social media manager. I've got my Facebook ads manager. I have an admin who does my books and is my numbers person. So she looks at all my numbers. And I'm also part of a business mastermind with a mentor, like a business coach and mentor, who I check in with every month and keeps me accountable and looks at my business and tells me where I can, push some buttons and pull some levers to try to make more money.
Awesome. But I think it all goes back to like, well, how'd you find your voice? How did you find that niche? But it's a process and a journey, and it's not getting caught up in like, I invested all this money, it didn't turn out over here, but it helped you to get clear and again, like really make that next decision of refinement. And that's really a beautiful message for people to hear. Like, it's okay if you invest in one area and it doesn't work out or nobody shows up. So what? That's going to happen a lot, when you're figuring out what it is that you're doing and meant to do, but just keep at it and eventually.
And it could be the best thing that happened to you, right? And I think it's also a level of being in dialogue, like being in dialogue with the universe and dialogue with your reality, so I pitched a ball. You can even think of it in a therapeutic vein. I pitched a ball to the universe by doing a lecture, and the universe pitches back, online course. I'm like, okay, so I throw it back, online course in romance writing. Nope. Try again, So, there's so many points at which I could have just walked away or given up on something. Right. Why didn't I? Why did I have the idea to keep going? And I think it's because I actually, really, for me, it comes down to a level of spiritual belief, honestly, that I believe on a spiritual level that there is an essence of power, a higher power, an energy that surrounds us all. I believe that it's a benevolent force, and I believe that force exists within all of us, that we are all part of a collective, and that if we can go use certain practices, for some it's meditation, for others it's prayer, for some it's art making, or whatever it is that gets us in touch with the essence of what we experience of our own being, then that inevitably will lead us towards the real physical, concrete world experience that continues to allow us to expand into the corners of ourselves, right? And that's a process of, it's a contrast that allows that process to expand. If you never butted up against a failure or a mistake, or if you never tried and did something wrong, then you would never become aware of what more is out there,
Absolutely. Each step takes you to the realization of a greater possibility. I think that's what's most exciting about going out on your own, is you start to really let go of this box that was kind of holding you in, the box of how you're supposed to practice, the box of like how you're supposed to think about money and fee
Yeah.
exchange when you're doing therapy, or even
Right.
how you're supposed to practice therapy, the
Mhm.
intervention style that you're supposed to be working with. And you start to just step farther and farther out, and more opportunities and potential
Mhm.
become visible.
Yeah,
And
for
that's really
sure.
exciting.
Yeah, never stop asking questions. And with a personal brand, any work that you do around that, or any awareness of boundaries that you have and that you've cultivated as a therapist, you play with, but they do serve you. Because if you are someone who wants to go the direction of a personal brand, um, you will be in constant dialogue with your own boundaries, because
Mm,
what you share and what you don't share needs to be very considered, right? It needs
mm-hmm,
to be, you need to make sure you're sharing something you've already processed, and also being cognizant of, is what I'm sharing now, is it serving my audience, and is it serving me,
mm-hmm.
really, right? So the and me becomes a bigger part of that explorative process, but it can be a lot of fun.
No, yeah, it sounds like you've been having a lot of fun, and
Mhm.
um, have just learned so much in your journey. And I'm incredibly grateful for all the knowledge that you shared today. And I think that listeners are going to really get so much out of this episode too.
Good, I hope
Um,
so.
yeah, and especially sharing about that fear of how other therapists are going to perceive you if you do things different to the way their purview is, and it doesn't align anymore. There is that fear, like, how dare you charge that much for your session? You're not meeting the needs of the people that need
Yeah.
you. All those things. And so really sharing that I think that's something that all of us that step outside the traditional, salaried role
Yeah.
really struggle with.
Yeah. And it's not an unfounded fear. Like, that voice does come out.
Mm.
I get hate mail.
Do
So
you really?
yeah, but it's, for every hate mail that I get, I also get 10 sales, and I also get, lovely individuals like yourself contacting me to talk about, how can more people think outside the box, right?
Hmm.
So, and if I didn't get any, if everyone agreed with me, then I would be doing something wrong,
Hmm.
because I wouldn't be speaking with a strong voice,
Hmm. I
you know.
think it's you're challenging the status quo, and
Mhm.
you're creating something new, and
Mhm.
people don't like change.
Yeah.
So they're resistant to that. I know I definitely experienced that when I said that I wanted to go and do this other aspect of things, and do more consulting work versus
Hmm.
staying in, practice,
Hmm.
serving clients.
Right.
And yeah, people have that attitude about the coaching piece of things.
And, and I would add to that, I think, uh, this is maybe a reframe on how to think about that. But if you are a licensed therapist, I mean, think about it. You have a real edge, especially if you want to get into the coaching realm,
Hmm.
because you have the credentials to back you up, right? You do have all the training. You have the experience. So in some ways, you have a leg up already, right?
Hmm.
And that is going to serve you. That, at least that has been the wisdom in my experience, is that has served me.
Hmm.
And it's and take advantage of the fact that coaching is unregulated. I mean, serve people in other states. right? That because you can, because you're good at what you do, because what you do is of high value and worthy of compensation and regard. And you put a lot of your heart and soul into your training and into working with people. And your message, if you are someone who's interested in being of service, then your message at its core is something that needs to be spread much further, far and wide, right?
Absolutely.
And the truth is that the more abundantly we serve and honor and revere the people who want to be of service, then that means they can be of service to more people. And that's kind of like what it goes back to what I was saying before, like the part of my business that supports me financially means that now I get to give away two free videos on YouTube a week. Now I get to if I'm going to run a group coaching program and I see someone in my online space who's particularly participatory, but maybe can't afford the full rate, I can offer them a sliding scale, and it's not going to mean I won't eat next week,
Right.
So your message goes so much further. You as a clinician are so much more relaxed, and you're so much more confident in yourself, and you know your value, and you are able to serve the people you want to serve. And once you honor yourself well enough, you can get into a position where you can affect real changes for the causes and the people and the charities and the communities that you want to serve. I mean, just imagine if our humanity, if we thought, like kind of going back to my doctor example, if we valued mental health and the emotional in our emotional lives, which is really the only thing that makes life worth living is how we feel about our lives, right? I mean, like, we don't just think around our lives, we feel our way through them. And, therapists this is a profession which is sort of like, here is how you can enjoy your life, like how do I enjoy this existence? And there is actually no more important thing, if you could think about it, right? Like, what more important thing is there? And so, aside from keeping the body alive in order to enjoy the life, so now we have doctors, right? So why is it that, if we pay therapists as much as we paid doctors, A, there probably wouldn't be as much of a need for doctors, and B, we would all be a lot happier. So why aren't we? And so I guess I'm just raising these talking points to maybe reframe the way that we're thinking about value, and the way we're thinking about skill, and the way that we're thinking about dissemination of service, right? How to be of service.
Yeah.
And what are the best ways to be of service? And if there are any advice, at least around the money piece, if there are any advice that I would offer people, it would be to just replace the word money with energy. Anytime you use the word money, replace it with energy. Today, I feel like I need more energy. Oh, I can invest more energy in that. Oh, start just one little thing, one little tip and trick. Just start doing that, and you'll notice things shift immediately.
I'm totally going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Thank you so much for making the time today. If people wanted to learn more about you, where do I need to direct them to find you? I'm going to add that in my show notes.
So I have they can find me on my website, which is just briannamcwilliam.com, or they can also find me on the continuing education website, which is creativeartstherapieson.com. And there should be a contact form on my website if anyone wants to email me.
And you had mentioned your online study prep for the ATCB exam. And is that going to be on the creativeartstherapieson.com? Okay,
Yes.
Perfect. Because I've been talking with supervisees, and they're like, there has to be an online place to study. I'm like, I don't know. I have this old book that I bought like forever ago. So now I can direct people there.
Sure. That'd be great.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Creative Psychotherapist Podcast. Before you run off or fast forward to the next episode, I just wanted to give you a little reminder that if you're in need of support, clarity or guidance on what action steps you need to take to get your business, service, or product up and running for sale, I'm here to help, and I'm offering clarity calls at the current COVID-19 discounted rate until the end of September 2020. After that, they're going to go back up to the regular fee, and I would love to set something up with you and help you get clear on what your goals are and what action steps you need to take to bring that vision into reality. And if that's something that interests you, please head on over to the website, creativeclinicianscorner.com. You can send me a message there and sign up for a clarity call, or you can send me a personal email, creativeclinician@gmail.com, and let me know what you're interested in. We'll get it set up.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Creative Psychotherapist. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. For show notes, downloads, and additional resources, head over to the website at www.creativeclinicianscorner.com.